I'm going to want to talk with you today about a tendency that we have when we engage with the narcissist. Now, let's keep in mind that that person can be very frustrating because they have such a strong need for control. They don't receive input. They have what we refer to as their alternate reality. They just kind of seem to make up some of the facts as they go along. They have low empathy. You know what I'm talking about. And when we think about that narcissistic person, it's not someone that engages well in healthy emotional and relationship management. Now, why don't we say our word for today is confounding. They can just confound you to no end because you want to pull your hair out. There's so much illogic that's there. And then what we tend to do is we tend to go into the asking of dumb questions. Now, when I say dumb questions, what I mean is we'll ask questions and there may be an answer, but actually it's a way of expressing how confounded you feel. And I can promise you, when you ask these kind of questions, you are not going to get a straight answer. Now, let me go straight into that and I'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Let's suppose that you are just so frustrated as you engage with that narcissistic person. And so the first question you might ask is, what's wrong with you? Now, as far as I'm concerned, that's the king or queen of all dumb questions. What's wrong with you? Now, let's think that through for just a minute. If you were to ask a narcissist that, and if you were to get an accurate answer, that person would say, well, actually, I have a deep-seated insecurity that's been on the inside of me for a very long time, and it results in me wanting to be in control as part of my protection, and then that leads me to be blaming and accusing, and I can also be highly defensive. So when you ask that question, it's a multi-layered question with many, many answers attached to it. That's the answer. Now, are you ever going to get a straight-up answer like that? Well, no. And so when you ask, what's wrong with you, then I think we can just say, it's such a futile question, that's a dumb one. All right, dumb question number 2. And that is, why are you always so critical? Now, once again, there may be something going on that you're onto that makes good sense. That person is being critical and harsh and condemning. And so you ask the question, and the correct answer would be, well, being critical means that you like to establish yourself as superior, which is something I do quite a bit. So that's the main reason I'm doing it. Dumb question, because you're never going to get an answer such as that. Or how about this one? Can't you see that you make mistakes too? Usually when you're confounded by that narcissist, they're pointing out something that you did wrong. And so you want to try to bring them into the human realm. Well, have you ever received a straight up answer for that one? And I think the answer is no. If, for example, you'd probably just fall over and faint if they said, well, you got me on that one. I do make quite a few mistakes, don't I? They're not going to say that. All right, how about dumb question number 4? And that would be, why is everything an argument with you? Usually whenever you attempt to speak into the narcissist and engage with them about whatever it is that you're disagreeing with, it turns into a disagreement pretty quickly. And in that confounded way of feeling, you think, man, I just have so many arguments with this person. Now, typically what the narcissist is thinking is, well, if there's an argument going on here, you're the cause. And so they're going to flip it right back onto you, which makes that another dumb question. Well, how about a 5th one? And that is, how would you like it if everyone knew what you're really like? You ever asked that one? Now, what you're attempting to do is you're trying to shame that person, and you're trying to put a little perspective by saying, this is not the way that you would treat other individuals, when in fact, actually, any kind of relationship that they have is going to have any kind of requirements to it that's probably going to come out that way. But how would you like for everyone else to know what you're really like? Because inevitably, that narcissist is going to come back and say, oh, I'll take my chances any day, but you know what? You're the one that ought to be afraid of that because you just come across so crazy. People think that you're a nice person, but you're not. They're going to throw it right back at you, which makes it yet another dumb question. How about this one? Why are you always blaming me? Or maybe a corollary to that. What did I do that was so wrong? I know that you can feel very frustrated because the narcissistic person can be in such a caustic and harsh kind of way. And so when you ask, why are you always blaming me? You're just kind of inviting them to start shooting bullets. Well, I've got a whole bunch of reasons why I'm still blaming you. Would you like to know why? And they can just go deep into it and just wear you out. I don't think that's a question you want to be asking. How about question number 7 here? Do you realize how unreasonable you really are? Or you might just ask another corollary. Do you realize how immature you come across? And again, they're not going to come back and say, oh, now that you pointed it out, I think you're right. What they'll do is they'll come back and say, if there's anyone that's being unreasonable here, it's you. And so they'll just lay into you, and that question just becomes the springboard for some very poor interaction. How about this one? What's it going to take to get you off my back? Now, that implies that you're tired of how they just ride you and come up with all sorts of difficult kinds of things. And so the narcissist, again, will not give you a straight answer. And so they'll say something like, well, I'll tell you what it's going to take. It's going to take you straightening up. If you just act right, you wouldn't have any kind of problems here now, would you? So they flip it right back onto you, which is one of their classic things of doing. How about this one? Do you not even care how people feel? And of course, you're including yourself in that one. And you're basically asking for a little empathy at that point. Do you just not care how people feel? And now that person, the narcissist, is going to come back and say something to the effect of, oh, I care a whole lot about how people feel. You're the one that doesn't care. Because if you cared, you wouldn't be having all this kind of improper kind of communication with me. And they're going to go back and throw it into the blame kind of thing. And then how about this last one? And this is a good one. Why can't you and I just sit down and talk like two mature adults? Now, you know how they're going to respond to that one. They're going to say something like, well, there's one mature person in this equation, and it's not you. So the narcissist is going to think, I can do it. You're the one that can't. And so as we go through all of these different questions, you can see that that's part of what causes you to feel so confounded so much of the time. They will not take your straight up communication, and they certainly are not going to answer your questions in any way that resembles honesty. So what are you really trying to do when you ask these questions? By the way, I call these cornering questions. Well, let's give you the benefit of the doubt and assume that you have some good rationale for this. One of the things you're trying to do is you're trying to make the narcissist think in a pensive, insightful style. Now, your technique leaves a lot to be desired, but you want the narcissist to think things through very carefully. They don't, but that's what you're wanting. You're wanting the narcissist to admit imperfection. They can come off as though they've got it all together and they're just putting it all onto you. And so you're wishing that they would admit their humanity. It's not going to happen, but that's what you're wanting to do. You're wanting to have a more inclusive approach towards relationships. Part of you asking the questions is you're feeling like you're the one that's always on the receiving end of blame and shame. And so you're saying, hey, let's talk about some of your inadequacies as well. Again, it's not going to work, but that's what you're wanting. Or you're wanting to see signs of a conscience that person has. And that's not a bad thing. But I guess we can go back and say, though, that when you ask the questions in this loaded kind of way, it not only doesn't get you those kinds of goals, it actually just makes matters worse and worse. Because instead, what you receive from that narcissist is you receive a lot of invalidation. They come back and they put it all onto you. You're just going to challenge them to get into a win-lose kind of communication with you. And guess where you're going to be? You're going to lose on that one. And you're going to create an atmosphere for defensiveness. Okay? So, all of that having been said, let me offer a few thoughts and then we're going to wrap it here for today. First, if you want to say something of a restorative or an insightful nature to the narcissist, take the question out of it and just flatten it and make a statement. If you say something like, why is it always an argument with you, as an example, just flatten it out and say, it seems like we could go really quickly into an argument. That's not what I want to do. I just want to go ahead and say what I need to say, and that's it. Or if you ask something like, why are you blaming me? You might say something like, I know you have a lot of hard thoughts towards me. I don't think that all the blame belongs on me, and I'd like for that to be something that you would understand. In other words, make your statement as opposed to just asking those cornering questions. A second primary thing to keep in mind is drop any notion that you're really going to change that person's way of thinking and communicating anyway. Keep in mind that one of the defining features of narcissism is the inability to receive input. They have such a need for control, and they have such a strong manipulative and exploitive kind of nature that they don't really want to admit any kind of faults of their own. And so you're not going to change them by trying to shame them or anything of that nature. And then that leads to a final thought, and that is, make sure that you plan your emotional well-being in a singular kind of way, rather than thinking if we can get ourselves coordinated, then we are going to be okay. Well, we are probably not going to be feeling okay, but you need to think of yourself singularly and make sure that you know how to maintain your own sense of composure, even if that person is a very confounding individual. Now, I do have one more question I want to ask. And that is, who could go wrong with somebody like this? Who could resist a dog like Gus? I know Gus has been on there with me before, and he just wanted to come back and say hi to you. Now, Gus and I would invite you to touch that subscribe button below our video here. We'd like to have you as part of our Surviving Narcissism Network, and I've also included some tabs for books and some online workshops, and so I hope you avail yourself to that. And I'll see you next time. Same thing with Gus. He'll see you too. See ya.